Alright, these are the DJI Goggles Integra, a pair of DJI FPV goggles that I actually glossed over when they first got released. I honestly just didn't give a shit about them because I was so happy with my new goggles too. But looking back now, it does make me wonder which is actually the better choice. So regardless of whether you already own the goggles too like me or not, this video is going to show you what the Integra's offerings and shortcomings are, plus whether you should buy one or not. Now, before we get into all the aesthetic differences and whatnot, I want to actually test these out in the real world by flying them with the Avata. So to be able to do that, we need to take them out of the box and set them up for my extremely crappy eyesight. Immediately as I unbox this thing, we can just notice one of the biggest differences between the Goggles 2 and the Integras is that instead of having fully adjustable diopters like we have on the Goggles 2, we actually get a box of lenses. If I'm being honest here, I really have no idea what my prescription lenses are, but I have an inkling that my left eye is normal and my right eye is like -1, so let's at least give that one a shot and see what we've got. For this changing out process, it is pretty damn simple. You just pop off the lens and then pick out your new lens, which for me, I'm just going to be changing out the right eye to a -1, grab that lens out, pop it into the lens holder, and then get to satisfyingly peel off the little bit of plastic so that you don't get any thumbprints on it. Then it's pretty simple again. You just pop it back into the goggles and voila! Your goggles are set up and ready to go. This non-adjustable diopter thing actually comes across as a bit of a positive and also a bit of a negative, by the way. You see, the positive for me is there's no chance of accidentally unlocking the diopters as I do on the Goggles 2 and then having to readjust them before flying. This actually happens more often than not because it's really easy to do. These adjustable knobs just push in and twist to unlock and then they move around freely, messing up my settings. But in saying this, it is equally as easy just to, readjust them and get them back to normal. The negative here, though, is the fact that if I want to show any of my friends DVR while I'm out flying with them, they're going to have a harder time seeing through these lenses clearly due to my eyesight differences. When using the Goggles 2, they simply just adjust their preferences and then you do the same when you get them back. Something that I have heard about these lenses, though, is that they have a significant increase in clarity over the Goggles 2. This would make sense as fixed lenses are generally clearer and have better optical quality. That's when comparing it to an adjustable lens. So take an example of like prime lenses with cameras, the ones that have the fixed focal lengths. Those are sometimes more expensive than a zoom lens, which are the lenses that allow you to, change the zoom range. Of course, you can get high quality zoom lenses for the cameras, but they do just cost an arm and a leg. Probably not the case with the Goggles 2 here. So are we putting this theory to the test as soon as I'm out on the field? Because if it is the case with these, I'm going to be hella excited. Just before we get out there though, I have a few more things to get ready. First up, this battery here, it needs charging. For me, this is where the Integra really starts to shine through as a simplistic system. No more separate battery to worry about and no more battery cable either. It's all built in right here into that cable and that battery pack. To charge it up, we simply just pop a USB-C charger right in there and yeah, it's that easy. It'll start charging. Interestingly enough though, a really dope thing that the Goggles 2 do not have is the fact that you can actually charge this up whilst it's powered on. Now, that's actually a really big deal because if you're flying all day, instead of having to worry about carrying multiple batteries with you, you simply just grab a big old power bank, plug it in, and charge this like all day. You'll be flying for as long as you need. The second thing that is an optional setup here is the overhead strap. Now, I do think that this is a really dope feature to include, and although not necessary, it would have been nice to at least have as an option on the Goggles 2, but instead, on the Integra here, we've got a strap loop here on the back, and also one on the top front of the goggles here. Using this included strap, you just slide it through, Velcro it over, and you do the same on this side, pop it through, pull it over, boom. This is going to give you a really similar feel to the last generation of goggles, which were the V2s that had the head strap over the top. But I'm going to be real here, I don't think that you'll actually find you'll need to use this overhead strap as the weight of this battery pack really is surprisingly lightweight. But if you do end up needing to use the strap, it does unfortunately feel like a little bit cheap being solid fabric instead of like an elastic or something. But at the end of the day, it does serve a purpose, and maybe if you have long hair or something, it might stop the battery moving around on the back. But for me, however, with my length of hair, the battery stays on there no matter what, and I mean, the head strap doesn't really do much aside from get in the way a little bit, so I won't be using it. With all that being said, the goggles are ready to go, so it's time to head on out and put them to the test.
Now, something that's worth noting here is the fact that the Integras have got a narrower field of view than the goggles too. This essentially means that the Integras are less immersive as the screen doesn't go as far to the edges, but I actually think it's for the better. These shots on the screen really help to demonstrate the differences between each pair, with the goggles 2 coming out significantly larger. The issue that I face with the goggles 2 is that the lenses actually cause a focus tunnel effect, in the sense that the center of the screens are tack sharp in focus, and then the further that you look out, the focus gets blurrier and the edges vignette. From the brief time that I've had with the Integras, I've definitely noticed that the entirety of the screens are a lot more in focus and don't actually vignette on the edges. This comes down to the combo of the further away display, which is the narrower field of view, and also the fact that the lens optics are slightly wider. I'm really super excited to put the Integras on and try them out while flying to see what my experience difference is like.
Okay, so I've got the Integra goggles on to start us off here, and I can tell you straight off the bat, I can see everything significantly more clearly in all parts of the screen, which is surprising to me because you'd think that a more expensive pair of goggles with adjustable diopters would actually help you out a little bit more, but apparently not in this case. So yeah, wow. Honestly, everything looks like it's in frickin' 4K HD right now when I'm flying this in comparison to the goggles 2, which kind of just don't. This actually made me really nervous to try out my goggles 2 because, oh wow, I can't get over it. You don't understand until you try it. The clarity of every edge of the screen is just, it's sharp, it's straight. I'm gonna put the goggles 2 on, I'm gonna give you my straight initial impression. Okay, so goggles 2. Don't get me wrong, this still looks bloody nice and sharp in the middle, which is where the main part of your focus is, right? You're always gonna be looking into the middle of your screen, realistically. But the second that I try to look into any of the corners, they've definitely got this dark vignetting from the side of the lenses, and they also go out of focus a whole lot more than the Integra goggles do. It's really interesting to notice this stuff because it's nothing that I would have noticed before until I put the Integras on, and now I'm kind of jealous that the Integras are so goddamn clear.
Another thing that the Integras feature is a supremely comfier face pad. It does seem to be slightly redesigned with thicker and softer foam, which actually conforms to my face shape way better than the goggles too. That in turn helps stop light leaks even more and just provides a nicer wearing experience. Speaking of light though, the Integras don't come with a lens protector, meaning that you're going to have to be super careful not to let the sun shine straight into the lenses, because otherwise you'll be risking the lens burn. The protector plate from the goggles too, however, does actually fit over the lenses on the Integra, so if you wanted to, I'm sure you could still pick one of those up and, your problem would be solved. This is a great point to mention that one of the biggest selling features of the Integras for the US is the built-in GPS, which apparently allows you to fly without the need to connect your phone for remote ID. I can't actually personally speak on this, as I'm in New Zealand where remote ID simply doesn't exist. So if that's the reason that you're wanting these goggles, I honestly can't help you out there, sorry. But look, taking a step back, it's definitely clear to me that the Integras are a better optical and actual fit for my face. So you'd think that maybe the comfier foam and crystal clear filming experience would make me want to switch over from the goggles too, right? Well, not so fast. There are still some more minor differences that I think give each pair of goggles their fair share of pros and cons.
So let's begin with the antennas. These bad boys are removable on the goggles too, and not removable on the Integras, like at all. They will not come off. Funnily enough, however, and I'm certain that some might actually disagree with this is a win in my books for the Integras. The number of times I've had my goggles 2 antennas lightly catch on something in my bag and just pop on out as I'm pulling it out is seriously uncountable. I also really have no need to ever change the antennas. The stock ones are simply just amazing, and currently the aftermarket antennas aren't that much better. The other plus that comes with the Integras antennas is that they actually have these soft little rubber pieces that are soft close, so when you close them, they don't make the slap against plastic. Compare that with the goggles too. It's just a nice premium touch that I honestly would have expected the goggles 2 to have, but instead I guess it's an upgrade for the Integras. Next up is the touchpad being changed to a back button and a 5-way toggle thing. It can be pressed forward, back, side to side, and down, and then with the back button being just that, a back button. I feel like I might have gotten a little bit spoiled with the touchpad on the goggles 2 by now, because it really does feel like a smoother experience navigating the menus and scrubbing through playback. Whenever I switch over to the Integras buttons, it's still a good experience. It just feels a bit more clunky and seems like the UI wasn't really designed for it. Not sure how I feel on the buttons. They're okay, but and definitely not my preferred choice. If we then flip our goggles to the other side, we find that our nice big 5x5 LED panel is now replaced by 4 LEDs, and they function completely differently. On the Integras, these LEDs are used to show you what your battery life is at. This can, of course, be checked within the goggles display, but it is nice to have an external way to be able to see it quickly too. The goggles too, however, these LEDs are a much more useful reason to actually have an LED panel, in my opinion. When flying, it displays what channel you're currently using, which is something that I have to check regularly when flying with other people. We usually don't use the auto channel feature, as we've actually had some serious problems when flying mixed CADX units and O3 units at the same time. So yeah, before we take off, we simply just check the goggles to make sure we're all on separate channels, and then we get to flying. What would have been nice to see on the Integras is the battery status to be on the back of the battery pack itself, and then the same 5x5 LED panel in place of the current battery status LEDs. The auto display off sensor has now been removed and is now replaced by an SD card slot. It seems to be an interesting place to put it, but I guess it doesn't really make any difference to the operation of it all, so it's all good. But I do have to admit, I miss having the screens turning on and off automatically, as that is a really nice battery saving feature. The final major differences really come down to the battery and the wiring. As a whole, integrating this entire system right into the goggles themselves, it's actually a really cool idea, and it's surprisingly convenient too. Like when I'm trying to put my remote's neck strap over my head, I don't have to worry about any dangling wires. Instead, it just goes right over, sits on my neck without a second thought. The weight balance is actually really nice too. I love having my head free and able to move around without actually being pulled forward at all. And although that isn't an issue with the goggles too, as they're already so damn light, it is actually an issue with the original V2s. I guess a few potential future problems that could arise with this integrated battery is the fact that it's non-replaceable, and you can't really just simply replace the batteries in it without pulling it apart and knowing what you're doing. Also, should at any point you damage the cloth head strap here, you have to be hyper aware that the power cable runs through it, and that also can't be replaced. I guess thinking about it, the same can be said about the antennas too. If you snap them, that's kind of it. Everything else appears to be the exact same as the goggles too, which is a massive plus considering it's a 300 New Zealand dollar cheaper pair of goggles. So yeah, the Integras do have a lot of strong points going for it, and I am in love with how crisp the screen actually is at its smaller field of view, which begs the question, who is it for? If you've already got the goggles too and are suffering from a blurry edged screen, I don't think that moving to the Integra is going to be your best move. Instead, simply bring your display's scale down to 80 or 90%, which theoretically will match the Integra's display, but still will give you the option to get a more immersive experience with the larger field of view, should you want to. If, however, you are either looking at buying between the Goggles 2, the Goggles V2, and the Integra, I would be steering everybody in the direction of these. The price difference of nearly 300 New Zealand dollars is not nearly justified by the small features that the Goggles 2 has over the Integra, and I think as a whole, you're actually getting a much better deal as long as you're aware of its differences. The same goes for an Avata combo too. If you can choose between the Goggles 2 and the Integras, and have no need for the extra Goggle 2 features, why the hell would you not just save yourself some money and arguably get better optics? I've left a link in the description box below, so if you're ready to pull the trigger, simply head down there. Otherwise, you can watch this video here to find out what I think is the best travel drone combo. Spoiler alert, it includes these goggles.